The following program is paid for by Absolute Mortgage, a division of Pinnacle Capital Mortgage Corporation. Absolute Mortgage Company, NMLS number 81395 and Washington CL number 81395 is an equal opportunity housing lender. Tina Mitchell, MLO number 145420, is a licensed loan originator with Absolute Mortgage. Visit absoluteloans.com or call 888-90-HOMES for cost information.
You're listening to The Money Hour with your host, Tina Mitchell, sponsored by Absolute Mortgage, a division of Pinnacle Capital Mortgage Corporation. Now, in the studio, local mortgage and finance expert, Tina Mitchell.
Welcome to The Money Hour on 570 KVI, the Sunday, March 30th show. I'm your host and mortgage expert, Tina Mitchell. Thank you for taking time to talk money. I am here every Sunday at 11 a.m. right here on 570 KVI. I bring into studio each week the best of the best experts in our local market on everything money. I'm here to help you in today's economy. And my lineup for the show today, Scott Monroe with Windermere, Real Estate Wall Street, buyer and sellers in today's real estate market. Real estate's a hot topic, and there's a lot of advice on how to navigate through this environment. But the wrong advice can be the biggest financial mistake that you can make. Our second guest in studio, I have Kevin Hergert with Hergert Inspection LLC. If you're purchasing a home, how do you know the history of that house, and how can you anticipate the cost to protect this asset moving forward? And my last guest in studio today is Kathy Morrow with Remax Performance Plus. Real estate is all about skill and negotiation. How important in today's real estate market is the negotiating process? It's pretty important. The environment that we're in, you want to know what to do and what not to do. So we're going to talk to Kathy on the real estate as well. Great information and great guest in studio. For more information on any topic discussed today, please pick up the phone, give my show a call, 1-888-987-0570. Again, it's 1-888-987-0570, or online at themoneyhour.com. And now let's go ahead and do a little money chat. Money, money, money. Escrow holdbacks. So I thought it'd be good to talk about escrow holdbacks. There's still some properties out there in the distressed market that might have some challenges and not meet the minimum requirement for a bank to actually finance the property. So an escrow holdback is an ability for you to move forward and purchase a home even though it doesn't meet the minimum requirements for the bank in order to finance on it. And with the understanding that money is going to be put aside, or that's why they call it an escrow holdback, money is going to be put aside that will be utilized to complete the items that need to be completed to meet the requirement for financing. And the reason that this is a really nice opportunity is because you and or the seller are not going to want to invest money into fixing a home, not knowing that that contract is actually going to come together. So this gives you the ability to secure and know that this contract is going to be completed. The bank's going to lend on it with the understanding that this work is going to be completed after the mortgage closes. So depending on, there's a lot of situations in how they look at escrow holdbacks and whether the lender's going to approve it. And that's who makes the decision, is the actual lender that's lending the money on the financing for the buyer will make the decision on whether or not they will allow a escrow holdback or not. Now you can, if the bank allows it, they're available with any type of financing. So that would be your conventional FHA, VA, USDA financing. Again, it's just on a case-by-case basis and how they're going to look at that and whether or not they feel that it's going to be not too much of a risk to close and secure the financing prior to these items being completed. So issues that you may have come up, a lot of the safety issues, that's where it can be a little frustrating for a buyer when an appraiser calls for missing handrails or cracked or damaged doors or cracked windows. These are things that don't seem like they're a major issue, and for a lender holding back or not allowing financing on these homes, which can happen because of a safety. The home has to be safe for you, and so that's why these items would be required to be completed and fixed prior to closing on the home. So this is a good example of an escrow holdback because it's not something that is real damaging to the property, small enough item that could just to be held back to where these items could be completed after closing. Now, in order to go in for an escrow holdback, you're going to be required to get 3 bids. So they're going to look at 3 bids from 3 different contractors. And then they're going to hold back 1.5 times the middle bid. So they want to make sure that if the bid is a little bit lower or it becomes in a little bit higher than what the bid is, the actual amount, there's going to be enough that's going to be held back in escrow to cover the entire amount for the cost. So they're going to take 1.5 times whatever the middle bid is. Now, minimum repair is $250. So if anything's less than that, they're going to expect somebody to come up with the money to get those items fixed. You as a buyer just needs to move forward without it, or the seller is going to incur that cost to get that item fixed. A maximum up to 10% of the purchase price. So if you were purchasing a $300,000 home, a maximum escrow holdback might take you up to $30,000. There's some small exceptions on that, but that's just kind of the basic rule of thumb. There is a fee associated for an escrow holdback. Why is there a fee? Because the bank actually has to have a department that's going to process this. And so you're going to have typically the fees around $150 depending on the actual bank, but that's probably a competitive amount that it's going to be. And in all honesty, it really should be more than that because it's a lot of work and a lot of risk to the lender that has to meet the secondary market, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. And I've talked to you about that before, that guidelines are based on Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, which is the secondary market, now taken over by the government since the mortgage crisis. So banks have to follow the requirements of the secondary market because mortgages are getting traded on secondary. So what they're doing is they're closing without meeting those minimum requirements. And that's going to be at risk that they have to hold that loan for the life of the loan if they don't get those requirements taken care of or the property conditions taken care of. So there's risk there as well as there's processing to make sure things get taken care of. So $150 for that risk and work, I think it's a reasonable fee. Maximum days to have the work completed usually is going to be 30 days. Sometimes there can be exceptions on that, but once the mortgage is actually closed, then from that time you have 30 days in order to get the work completed. So you've got to make sure that you're strategizing and you're not going to run into issues there. If for some reason you don't get the work completed for 30 days and you don't get an exception because the bank doesn't want to go out there and do the work, trust me. But if you're communicating and you're a few days late and you can show the work is the progress of the work and the bank doesn't feel the risk, then you should be okay with an exception. But I would do everything to make sure that you're going to fall with whatever the agreement is that you have, because otherwise the bank can take that 1.5% that they held back. They're going to choose their contractor and go out there and get the work completed. Loan can't be locked for any shorter period of time than the escrow holdback. So that's something to look at, especially in this interest rate environment, because we've been saying for a long time that the interest rates have nowhere to go but up. I know we've been saying that for quite a few years, but everybody feels the risk of the interest rate environment increasing. So if you're getting locked in for a shorter period of time, and then that rate is not going to be covered, you're not going to be covered with that interest rate for the period of the closing period. You need to make sure that you're locking in for the amount of time it's going to take to actually complete that work. So if you've got 30 days to complete the work and you've got a 30-day closing, then you're going to get locked in for a 60-day period. Anything over a 60-day period, you're going to start seeing higher interest rates for the extended lock-in. So then it's going to put you in a position that you're actually going to wait and gamble on the interest rate market and hold off for whatever period of time that you need to stay within that 60 days. So that might be a risk that you do not want to undertake. Now, a lot of times what happens is you're actually already locked in. Once your offer is accepted, you're in a position to lock in your interest rate. So if you're already locked in your interest rate, then the appraisal comes back and you see that there's issues here, you're going to pay an extension fee to get that rate extended through the period of time of the escrow holdback. So that's a cost you need to take in consideration on top of the $150 cost or whatever that lender's required cost is going to be. And who pays for the escrow holdback, or who puts that money, that 1.5 times the minimum bid? That's negotiated on, whether it's a combination of the seller's funds, the buyer's funds, or a combination of both, or one or the other. So that's something in the process and renegotiation when that appraisal comes back and you see that there's issues to the home, how that's going to be looked at. After work is completed, the lender's going to send out the appraiser to go back out and get what's called a 442. It's basically a reinspection, so you're going to have an additional fee for that reinspection as well. And you're going to have to provide all of the documentation, save your receipts, everything that you had for that work completed, because that's what they're going to use to actually refund for that escrow holdback. And then anything that's extra is going to go back to you as well. So just a real creative way to possibly get and secure that financing for a home that may have some work that came up that you were not anticipating. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to give the show a call, 1-888-987-0570. Again, that's 1-888-987-0570. And coming up next on the Money Hour, one of my trusted sources for our local real estate market and advice for buyers and sellers is Scott Monroe with Windermere Real Estate Wall Street, right here on 570 KBI after this short break.
Do you want an experienced real estate agent that really cares about you and has the experience and background to look out for you? Scott Monroe with Windermere Real Estate is your guy. Scott's background in construction and his top producing numbers ensure that you will be in exceptional hands. Scott has worked with Windermere Real Estate since 1992. His low-pressure approach and unfiltered honesty have helped hundreds of buyers and sellers achieve their goals throughout the Seattle area. Check out what others say about him at his website, scottdmonroe.com. Scott would love to have coffee with you and see if he's a good fit for you.
This is Scott Monroe with Windermere Real Estate. Call me at 206-406-9388. Again, that number is 206-406-9388. I'll look forward to talking with you.
This is the Money Hour with your host, Tina Mitchell, on Talk Radio 570 KBI. Now, back to the show with local mortgage and finance expert, Tina Mitchell.
Welcome back to the Money Hour with your host and mortgage expert, Tina Mitchell, right here on 570 KBI, each week to share expert advice and inside knowledge on today's economies and how it can affect your money. And in studio right now, Scott Monroe with Windermere Real Estate Wall Street, here to discuss what you need to know about the local real estate market. And a little bit about Scott. Scott started with Windermere Real Estate in 1992 and is still with the same firm. He's been consistently in the top 3 in the 4 Wall Street offices. Certified relocation specialist working with corporate transferees moving in and out of our area, working with Boeing, Microsoft, Amazon, Starbucks, T-Mobile, Google, and eBay are just to name a few. Prior to real estate, Scott grew up in a family of builders and joined the family business building homes and schools all throughout the state of Alaska. As also spent time in Japan working with Japanese home builders and won an award for model home in
Sapporo.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Scott. So lots of experience and lots of travel and just a wealth of information to share with my listeners. So Scott, I'm so excited to have you back in studio again. Thank you so much for coming in.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So I had so much fun with you last time. I had to bring you back.
That's right.
So Scott, let's go ahead and start out with the market and what's happening with. We've got an inspector in studio today, and he's going to actually come at the next segment. But let's talk about the inspection as far as on a pre-inspection for a seller and what that means to a buyer and to the seller.
So what's going on in the marketplace so far this year, and it's happened many times over, since I've been in the business, is when you get into a seller's market where there's not enough homes to go around for buyers. I'm sure you're experiencing that quite a bit right now, where buyers are complaining there's just no inventory. Yes. And so what it's doing is escalating prices, number one, but it's also causing buyers to get into situations they maybe didn't anticipate. And the other night, for instance, 2 nights ago, I heard of a house in Ballard that just got listed. They had 40 offers on the house. 40.
Oh my gosh.
Which to me, the listing agent should be ashamed of themselves, number one, for putting a lot of buyers that never had a prayer of getting that house through that process. But you're hearing stories of that, and I've been involved in a lot of them already this year, where there's typically 5-6 offers, and buyers are, of course, trying to posture themselves to get the seller to accept their offer. Exactly. And so what's happening is these pre-inspections where buyers, well, let me back up. A seller will tell their agent, well, what should we do? The agent will say, let's give the market a chance to see the house. So they'll typically put it on and wait 5 to 7 days. Occasionally I see it up to 10. Probably most commonly it's going to be about 5 days. And then they said, we'll look at all offers at that point. So the buyers have those days to check out the house or do a pre-inspection and a sewer scope. And so what happens is buyers are all paying for different inspections to be done kind of at the same time.
Along with those possibly other 5 or 6 that are strong offers.
Exactly. I've talked to inspectors that have been in the same house with 2, 3, 4 other inspectors at the same time doing the exact same thing.
Yeah, wow.
I've seen 3 sewer scope vans lined up at a house to do the same sewer scope over and over and again. So to back up, I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about that because that's really happening all over the city. And it's, in my estimation, a little bit of a problem, for strategy. How are we going to get somebody to accept our offer? Can we afford to keep doing this?
Sure. If
we do this, how do we know we're going to win? And then more to the point, if you're a seller, is that even a good option for you?
Well,
so
do you want all those inspectors? Do you want all those inspectors going through your home? Because an inspection, I mean, it's a pretty intense process, and I imagine you've got 20 different inspectors all doing 20 different inspections on the home. There actually could be damage, and it could be a potential risk to the seller as far as the property.
Absolutely, and plus, the implication when you do all this is that you're going to sell above list price. So this is where my first point that I will preach to anybody that will listen is sellers and listing agents, anybody that hears my voice, please, please, please consider doing pre-inspections yourself before you put the house on the market.
Okay, so let's talk about that, Scott. So basically, if you're listening and you're a seller today, a pre-inspection is you're getting an inspector, you're paying for an inspector as a seller prior to putting the home on the market, getting an idea of the condition of the house ahead of time so you can strategize and communicate with that. So let's say a seller, and I totally agree, Scott, that it is on a seller understanding what that home has to offer and providing that information to the buyer up front. So what are you seeing if a seller does that? What are you seeing now, these new buyers? So you've got 40 people that are going to come in and make an offer on this house. What are they doing now that there's been a pre-inspection?
Well, the debate on that obviously is why, and then a lot of agents will say it's a disclosure issue that the seller doesn't want to know these problems because then they have to disclose them.
Okay. And what's your answer to that?
My point of view is you're going to find them out anyway, and you're, especially on a sewer, if you got a collapsed sewer, guess what? Everybody's going to find that. It's not going to be a secret. I would rather know it up front so I have a chance to deal with it, maybe hit some of those inspection items, give buyers the assurance that this home, we have nothing to hide.
Okay.
And my point of view is you're going to find this stuff out anyway. So I'd rather know it so I can price it appropriately to begin with at the beginning of the process. What it does in turn for buyers is I would contend that not everybody can go out and spend $600, $700, $800 on every offer they make, not knowing if they're going to get it. And interrupt me anytime you want. But I actually do believe it gives buyers a peace of mind. I think it attracts more buyers to make an offer on your house because they now know the condition.
Okay.
And a lot of buyers and agents, frankly, are tempted to make offers without inspections whatsoever just because they're tired of getting their rear kicked. They don't have the money to do it on every offer. Or they just want a house.
Of course. So let's go back. You had made a comment about 40 offers and, shame on the listing agent for allowing those 40 buyers to actually come in and make an offer. Did you say a home in Bothell?
Ballard.
In Ballard. So what would the listing agent do to narrow that down so you didn't have 40 people presenting offers, but instead you had the 5 or 6?
Understand the market, and this is what differentiates agents. A lot of people will say, I'm going to go with a discount brokerage, or I'm going to go with a novice agent, somebody that hasn't been around or whatever. And the truth is, a good agent will make you money. The commission's a joke. They should way more than make you their commission.
Of course.
And it's understanding what you have. It should not have been a surprise to them that that tells me the house was underpriced big time. And the point is, say I sold one last year that was priced at $475. It went for $615.
Wow.
A buyer that's...
And what do you think really that was? Do you think a fair market value would be close in that $600? Why would somebody list a home at $475?
Because they were an out-of-area agent that didn't understand the community was exactly
But
what it was.
listing it at $475, they sure got a massive amount of people that would come and look at that house, because when you're comparing it and seeing what's out there in comparables, it brings in the buyers, so you can look at that site as well.
Brings in the buyers, but in fairness, I mean, 2/3 of them never had a prayer get in the house, and really they're irrelevant to the process.
Because they were planning on buying at a $475 price range, and it ultimately ended up going for over $600,000.
Yeah, and there were cash offers in the upper 500s. So I mean, the all day long. I mean, within reason, there's a lot of escalations, and so I'm not saying you can price it exactly right, but I mean, the point is you should be in the same ballpark.
Yes.
Because I routinely have seen them even this year go 30 to 50 grand over asking, which that's kind of out of the ballpark in itself.
So you depending on because you work with buyers, Scott, and you work with sellers, and you're very successful in representing individuals on either side, depending on who your clients are and what their needs are. But as to say that you're representing a seller, so you're from it because a buyer's perspective and a seller's perspective are going to be exactly opposite. I mean, it's a negotiation strategy different with both sides. So as representing a seller, and if you're listing the home for that seller, would you advise listing it for a little bit less than what the competition is listing for to get those multiple offers? Or what is your best pricing strategy when representing a seller?
It depends, and that depends on the area. There's, what I call top-tier neighborhoods, and there's the middle of the road, and then there's lesser neighborhoods that, you got a funky monkey house in a neighborhood that sucks. Nobody's going to compete for that listing. You don't need to do you don't need to do anything. You're going to be lucky to get a buyer.
Got it.
But if you're in, the heart of Green Lake, top of Queen Anne, whatever, you can count on if you got a good house, you're going to get some people fighting for it.
Yeah.
So that's the answer to that. If you got a known commodity that people are going to want, you should consider it. And my point of view is you're playing with house money. Look, we're going to get multiple offers.
Yeah.
You're going to get over ask, and you're going to do really good. Your investment is $750 or whatever. Not only provides us with making sure we don't get, blindsided with a busted sewer line or some, big issue with the chimney or furnace or something like that. And it will attract more buyers. Count on it.
Sure.
And this, again, is experience. A good agent will know that market and be able to advise properly on that.
Okay. So let's flip over to the buyer side. And a lot of your buyers, because you are in the prime of the market in the areas that you do a lot of your business in. And so there's lots of these multiple offers going on. How are you coaching a buyer in the multiple offer situation as far as price and preparing them for what could happen and the best strategy for them?
Don't get hung up on the list price. You go in to buy a T-shirt, it's $10, that's the price. Houses aren't that way. If you've been out looking at the market, trust your instinct and your gut, because the price is beside the point. And case in point, that 475 house I mentioned, I knew instantly that was not a 475 house. And so the dialogue with the buyer wasn't anything to do with that. I said, you guys know that this is probably going to be a 600 plus house. Yeah. So I tossed that out right away. So it's like getting real right at the bat.
Yep.
And then what I tell buyers is if we're going to compete, sometimes you just got to let them go. You got to let go of the outcome in every negotiation at some point.
Makes sense.
And you have to decide, okay.
Because some buyer might be crazy with what they're willing to do to get that home.
Exactly. Okay. And then, it's like in sports, sometimes you just say, good shot. You know what I mean? It's like,
move on to the next one.
Yeah, exactly. And so to me, I measure it like, am I going to be happy if this buyer calls me 5 years from now and wants to sell?
Sure.
Or they get their rear kicked in this thing and they're buried in it and I don't want to have nothing to do with it.
Makes total sense.
So I have to have courage to tell them the truth. And then sometimes there's just something that's special about the house. They need to get that house. So when I coach them, we will talk about pre-inspections and sewer scopes. By the way, a sewer scope in the city right now, most people are doing them. That is just where you run a camera down the sewer line because they're made out of concrete, and most of them are about 70, 80 years old.
And that's a cost of
$250.
So you've got
a
that
cheap
plus
one's
the inspection.
$195.
Okay.
And an inspection is going to run you anywhere from $350 to $500. In exceptional cases, a little bit more. So that's what we're talking about. They're going to go in and assess the house and give you a condition report. It's like taking a car to a mechanic that's used, to check it out before you buy it. So what you're going to be tempted to do is, if they do not provide that report or a sewer scope, and there are multiple offers, number one, you can assume almost each time, and again, I have to defer to each agent in this situation, but I can automatically assume it's going to go over asking price. Not everybody will do inspections and pre-inspects. And one of the strategies, it's not recommended, but is, 3 people did pre-inspects. It must be good enough because they're still making an offer. And so some people will go in there and not do anything. They will, what I call, ride the coattails of the other agents and the other inspections that are happening. Some will call listing agents and say, does anybody want to split the cost of a scope or an inspection? My buyers would be willing to do that. I think that's a great...
I have never, ever... That's why I love having you in studio. You've always have some creative, and I hear a lot of things because I talk with a lot of realtors, and that's the first time that I've heard that. That is awesome.
It's a great idea, and sometimes it's effective and works. And I shared a scope last year with somebody, and why not, The other thing to do is educate yourself. I'm a big fan, growing up building. I'm familiar with the DPD site. You can go and pull up houses and see if there's permits pulled or if there's been sewer improvements around that. Sometimes it shows them, sometimes it doesn't. Yep. I hear music. Yeah,
Scott, if you've been here before and done this, there's never enough time, especially for all the amazing stories that you have to share. I just appreciate your wealth of information. I appreciate your time coming into studio, and thank you so much.
You bet.
And coming up next in the Money Hour, if you're purchasing a home, how do you know the home story? A home inspector is the person that you need. Different than the appraiser who determines value of the home, the inspector determines today's condition, and as important, what the home may hold in the future condition of that house. Kevin Hergert with Hergert Inspection LLC right here on 570 KBI after the short break.
Are you behind on your mortgage payments and unsure about the road ahead? Magnum Law Group helps families just like yours navigate through the foreclosure avoidance process. Are you underwater on your home and unsure what to do? Magnum Law Group will help you understand your options. Are you facing foreclosure and need to stop a trustee sale? Magnum Law Group has success in doing this and may be able to help you too. If you're tired of dealing with the banks and getting turned down for loan modification, Magnum Law Group will take on the banks for you and lead you through the process for the best possible outcome. They lead the competition with superior knowledge and expertise.
This is Craig from Magnum. You can reach us at 425-605-6393 or at www.magnumlawgroup.com. See you at the next seminar.
Do you want an experienced real estate agent that really cares about you and has the experience and background to look out for you? Scott Monroe with Windermere Real Estate is your guy. Scott's background in construction and his top producing numbers ensure that you will be in exceptional hands. Scott has worked with Windermere Real Estate since 1992. His low-pressure approach and unfiltered honesty have helped hundreds of buyers and sellers achieve their goals throughout the Seattle area. Check out what others say about him at his website, scottdmonroe.com. Scott would love to have coffee with you and see if he's a good fit for you.
This is Scott Monroe with Windermere Real Estate. Call me at 206-406-9388. Again, that number is 206-406-9388. I'll look forward to talking with you.
This is the Money Hour with your host, Tina Mitchell, on Talk Radio 570 KBI. Now, back to the show with local mortgage and finance expert, Tina Mitchell.
Welcome back to the Money Hour with your host and mortgage expert, Tina Mitchell, right here on 570 KBI. I am dedicated to my listeners, providing you with tools needed to make informed decisions on all matters regarding your money. And in studio right now, Kevin Hergert with Hergert Inspection LLC. What does a home inspection cover? Why do you need one? And how does it all tie in with today's real estate market? And a little bit about Kevin's background. Kevin is the owner of his inspection company. He's licensed in Washington State and trade member of NACHI, International Certification of Home Inspectors. He has over 6 years experience inspecting homes and 25 years as a home builder, which gives him a wealth of experience in this arena. All Kevin's home inspections include a structural pest inspection and thermal
imagery.
Thank you. Can't read my own writing here on my bio. Kevin, thank you so much for coming into studio today, and first time guest. So excited to have you here.
Yeah, thank you very much.
So let's go ahead and start out with the purpose of home inspection. If you could talk a little bit about to my listeners on what is the purpose of the inspection.
Well, the purpose of a home inspection is really for a buyer to understand the condition of the property and, really what, the value of their asset that they're potentially buying and, what they might run into in the future as far as, having to replace the roof or the furnace in the future, problems that aren't quite visible. Typically, they're in the crawl space. A lot of houses in this area have water under them and rodents. Really, it comes down to just giving them the condition of the property, not really the value of the house. I get that question a lot from agents and buyers, and really they take my information and then take it from there with the real estate agent and the appraiser. And
that's important to understand the difference. The appraiser is to support the value of the property. Now, the appraiser could call, if you were listening to the beginning of the show during my money chat, the appraiser could call things that could be an issue with the home, but it's just a quick visual of what they can see. But they're really there to determine the value of the home, whereas your inspector has nothing to do with the value of the home. It's the conditions and things that are wrong with the house, as well as some things that could come up in the future that could be wrong. So we were talking with Scott on the real estate side, and there's just a lot of chaos and craziness going on in the market because of the lack of inventory. And having a home inspection is such an important process to where nobody wants to make this type of investment into a real estate property and not understand the condition of the home. So let's say that there's not a pre-inspection that's done, as we talked about earlier with the seller. So there's been no inspection, no idea the condition of the home, at least from the detailed arena that you come from. So the buyer's going to get their own inspection. Things come up. What are you seeing as far as the seller and what they're doing with that information?
Well, at this point, if they're not under contract and they're just wanting to put an offer in on one of the houses where, again, you're expecting multiple offers, I typically advise people, unless there's something really serious, if it's really serious, you might want to walk away, or maybe it's still a good deal. But most of the items, they can be repaired. It's a matter of money and who's going to pay for it.
Sure.
And I would probably just try, if you can, go in without any kind of request of the seller to fix anything, again, in a multiple offer situation, because you will probably lose out to somebody else who doesn't ask for anything. Yeah.
So let's say the seller's not fixing these items. What is the client doing?
Well, for instance, you might run into a situation where the roof is in very poor condition, and then I guess that would go back to what you talked about earlier with an escrow holdback. Another option is, if it's not too bad, they might get a roof certification for 5 years to clear the financing side, and then just know, in the future they're looking at a replacement on the roof.
And that's what I think is so important when I talk with my buyers in the early stages before they get out in the market, and just talking about the difference of appraiser versus an inspector. And I say that's really the great thing with your inspector is it's not just right now, but a good inspector is going to give you an idea of where that home might be going. And so you don't know for sure what the home has that could come up, but something just like an example of you said with the roof. I mean, it's got a 5-year roof cert. That doesn't mean that the roof is going to be good for long term. So here's what you could be looking at and penciling in and budgeting for the future. So we talked a little bit about multiple offer situations, and even in this environment, and we've listened to, one of the top agents in our local real estate market, even though it's a seller's market and they don't have to do pre-inspections, it's a benefit. What are you seeing with sellers, and do you see that they are doing pre-inspections?
Well, as far as sellers actually doing inspections before they put their homes on the market, I don't see a lot of it. And it always amazes me when I go to do an inspection and, you have a flood of buyers out there and people like me going out there doing their inspections, and you open up the crawl space access, and there's a foot of water under the house. Mm-hmm. And I can't believe that their listing agent doesn't advise the buyer to open up the crawl space access and just take a look before you list the house.
Exactly. Yeah. So you're agreeing with the pre-inspection to get an idea of what your home has to offer so that you can really be in a position to maximize your potential income or a price on that home. Because the worst thing you could do is get your home, get an offer accepted, an inspection comes in, then you start the negotiation process where if you know up front that this item, and I don't know what the percentage is, but I know statistically the percentage, it's going to cost you a lot more as a seller to have to complete those items if that's the way the negotiation goes after the fact, rather than if you would have just gotten that work done up front, it would have cost a whole lot less. So you're going to have it's going to come up and it's going to have to be done. Or if you do get that work completed, you're going to be able to list your house for that much more because that issue is not there.
Right. And the other problem is, let's say you actually have somebody buy a house subject to inspection. Mm-hmm. You got the deal all signed. It goes pending on the market. And then all of a sudden I find a foot of water under the house. The buyer gets cold feet, walks away. Then all of a sudden your house comes back on market and you've lost your sales, initial sales momentum.
Yeah. Very, very good point. So what are you seeing in your pre-inspection when you have buyers that come to you? And I know you work with a lot of top agents in our local market that are referring their buyers and saying, look, you need to give Kevin a call. Here's what your options are, doing a pre-inspect. So you're working with one of the buyers doing a pre-inspection and there are defects. What are you seeing that the buyers are doing?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, most of them, unless it's a real serious issue, will opt to just figure that into the price that they're going to offer on the house. Okay. You know, how badly they want it, how good of a value they feel it is. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. You know, most problems can be fixed. It's just a matter, again, of who's going to pay for it.
And what the cost is.
And what the cost is.
Yes.
Yeah.
So let's talk about new construction because there's a lot of new construction going on in our local market here. So versus a home that's, 5 or 10, 20 years old, how do you determine on getting an inspection? Because I know you want to inspect every single home regardless of the fact of its new or existing, correct?
Yes.
And so what's the difference between that? If you've got a new home, you would think, well, it's a new construction home. Why would you get a home inspection?
Well, I've done quite a few new home construction inspections and have found some pretty serious defects. And these are homes that have been signed off by the local jurisdictions. Uh-huh. The local building inspector does not have 2 hours to spend going through a house. I've walked into some houses in the inspections. I've pulled half of the stair balusters out. They were just loose. Wow. Heating systems put in backwards. Just a whole variety of different issues that, I'm sure the homeowner probably would have figured it out sooner or later. Mm-hmm. But, for example, the baluster issue, their child could have fallen off the rail out the staircase.
Wow. Wow. So what about another reason other than what we've talked about of why one of my listeners might hire a home inspector?
Well, if you're a existing homeowner, you might want to hire a home inspector just to have them go through, make sure that things are just basically functioning as designed by the house. You don't have water in the crawl space, proper flashings on the roof. Okay. And also just general advice on keeping the house in good condition. So
just like a car, you take your car in to make sure everything's okay. So ultimately, if there's an issue, you're going to catch it soon. It's going to ultimately cost you a lot less money.
Correct.
So and what an amazing advice, Kevin. And I don't know very few homeowners that actually do that because I think that they're just not educated and don't think about it. But if you were doing that, which is a really smart thing, how often would you say to bring an inspector in to check your home?
I would say on an existing house, probably every maybe 3 or 4 years.
Okay. So, Kevin, let's talk about you because I know that you're really awesome, but I would like my listeners to know as well. Can you share things that set you aside from the traditional home inspector that they may come across in our local market?
Well, there's a few things. Some home inspection companies, when you call them up, they basically have employees that work. So when you call up, such and such inspector, they're going to send out somebody else basically that works for them. Okay. I'm the only person working for myself, and I plan to keep it that way because I have total control on the quality of the work. Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. And what about some? Oh, go ahead, Kevin.
A couple other things. I have, as you mentioned, the construction background. Mm-hmm. I think knowing how a home is put together is very important, and basically trying to figure out what is going wrong with it. And then the last thing, I made an investment in the infrared camera, which, is quite expensive. And it's an awesome tool. A lot of people think it's a gimmick, but I have found numerous items such as severe overheating in electric panels and plumbing leaks that you can't see yet with the camera.
So you've got the extra tools. What else do you have in your tool belt or qualifications that set you aside?
Well, probably the most important thing is just a sharp eye.
That's really a good thing to have as a home inspector.
Yeah, just got to keep, be very observant.
So with that sharp eye, you talked a little bit earlier about critters. Let's talk about that in our local market. What are you seeing? Mice?
I think almost at least 50% of the houses out there have some form of rodent in them. A lot of it's very obvious. They have a torn crawl space vent, for instance. I can tell you that's probably one of the things that just turns people off when I come out of a crawl space and say there's rodents in there.
Yeah,
boy. They just are.
I'm just glad you're in the crawl space seeing those rodents and not me.
But, that's probably the most common thing.
Okay. And now in this environment with everything, going so quickly, there's a lot of pre-inspection, so you can strategize schedule-wise, but still there's whether you're waiting and doing a pre-inspection as a buyer or you're doing a pre-inspection as a buyer, or you're waiting until the offer is accepted, you've got a certain amount of time to work with. How soon do they need to call you, and what's your turn time to get into that property?
Well, my schedule, like probably every other inspector out there, it changes probably 2 or 3 times a day.
Of course.
Most people need an inspection probably 5 days or sooner. On Saturday and Sunday, my phone starts ringing and people call up and say, I need it this afternoon. So it's, the sooner you can get on the schedule, the better.
Makes total sense.
Yeah.
You want to just have everything lined up, have your inspector. Give the show a call, 1-888-987-0570. Again, 1-888-987-0570, or online at themoneyhour.com. If you're thinking of buying a home, pick up the phone, give the show a call so I can connect you with Kevin and he can inspect your home. And as a seller, we've heard it from 2 of my experts in studio today. Get a pre-inspection. Understand what your home has to offer or not, and get that taken care of so you can really maximize the dollar for the house. Thank you so much, Kevin, for coming into studio. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Coming up next in the Money Hour, here to discuss more topic regarding our real estate market is Kathy Morrow with RE/MAX Performance Plus right here on 570 KVI after the short break.
Do you want an experienced real estate agent that really cares about you and has the experience and background to look out for you? Scott Monroe with Windermere Real Estate is your guy. Scott's background in construction and his top producing numbers ensure that you will be in exceptional hands. Scott has worked with Windermere Real Estate since 1992. His low-pressure approach and unfiltered honesty have helped hundreds of buyers and sellers achieve their goals throughout the Seattle area. Check out what others say about him at his website, scottdmonroe.com. Scott would love to have coffee with you and see if he's a good fit for you.
This is Scott Monroe with Windermere Real Estate. Call me at 206-406-9388. Again, that number is 206-406-9388. I'll look forward to talking with you.
This is the Money Hour with your host, Tina Mitchell, on Talk Radio 570 KBI. Now, back to the show with local mortgage and finance expert, Tina Mitchell.
Welcome back to the Money Hour with your host and mortgage expert, Tina Mitchell, right here on 570 KVI. I build a network of elite industry professionals every week sharing their knowledge and expertise to my listeners. And my last guest in studio today is Kathy Morrow with RE/MAX Performance Plus, here to discuss what's happening in today's real estate market and how consumers are reacting to the current environment. Kathy was born and raised in Oregon and graduated from Oregon State University. After graduation, she married her husband, John, who was in the Air Force for 22 and a half years, and they have lived in many states throughout the United States. They settled back on the West Coast in 1996 and have bought and sold 5 homes along the way, and the process brings her personal experience to the buying and selling of real estate. Kathy's been licensed in Washington State since 1997, so she has been through the ups and downs of the real estate market. Kathy, thank you so much for coming into studio today.
Thank you for having me.
And great conversation that we had with Scott on real estate and with Kevin on the inspection side.
Absolutely.
So how does, with you, Kathy, with buyers, how does a buyer get the house that they really want in the market?
Buyers are coming these days less prepared than they used to be because they haven't wanted to buy. Mm-hmm. So the first thing you have to instruct them is to get pre-approved. Not just maybe approved online, but actually talk to a lender and get that process started so they know what type of loan they qualify and how much down payment they're going to need.
It makes total sense. And in this environment, in any environment, you actually have to have that pre-approval letter in hand to even move forward. But I like how you point and touch base on loan program and down payment and price and where they're willing to go, because in this market, when we talk about the house and what it's listed for and these multiple offers, the price going up, you really have to be prepared to know how far you can actually go up in price, right?
And frequently, a buyer can afford a lot more house than
they can, because they're lending at a 45% debt to income ratio based on gross income. You're totally correct. So I'm going to say right here, and Kathy just said it, if you think it's hard to get financing, it's not. I mean, they are still lending at a 45% debt to income ratio, and I don't know very many of my clients at all that are going even close to that, me representing on the finance. So I totally agree with you. So you've got money available to you, but what are you willing to actually do payment-wise?
Payment and down payment and closing costs. I mean, the closing costs can all be part of it. Even in a multi-offer situation, sometimes buyers can get closing costs. It depends who you're competing with.
Sure.
And what type of home it is.
Yep. So you got to just know your numbers and see what you need to really pull that deal together and make it work and strategize and be planned ahead of time. So what does a buyer need to do an additional in those steps to move forward?
Well, first of all,
offer?
I like to meet with a buyer and go through a buyer interview and really learn what's their most important things are for a house. It might be bedrooms, it might be location, it might be schools, it might be a garage, or it might be simple as a bathtub in the master bedroom.
Okay.
It doesn't really matter, except it matters to them and to find that right house. And of course, after they've had the approval part, it gets easier. And then just picking area, but they need to also interview I think a realtor, or at least a competent real estate agent, because in this market, you could easily overpay. Yes, there's multiple offers, but there's also sellers thinking their houses are worth a lot more than they are. They're pricing them maybe what they paid for, maybe so they're not a short sale, or just, of course, that house down the street that didn't have anything needed to be done, sold for a lot more money. So you still have that part. And the buyer needs to be smart.
Yep.
Inspections, and if they do a pre-inspection, which I have not had as many people do pre-inspections because I don't primarily sell in Seattle. I'm a little south of Seattle.
Okay.
So they can still get the inspection done within 2 days or 3 days. And that is still important to know if that house is something that they want to buy.
Yeah, and so there's a lot of different factors, and most important is what I hear you say, Kathy, is you need to really be prepared. You need to know what you can do, know what you're willing to do, know what the costs are. Scott said earlier in our first segment that he wants to make sure when his buyers or sellers, buyers in this example what we're talking about, actually will come back to him again, which a lot of realtors and in the industry, when you're talking about today's sale, they're focused on today's sale. They're not focused on the future of their business. They're focused about their money right now. And that's in any sales environment. And it's finding those percentage, that small percentage of the industry that are really looking for those relationships that they're building. So communicating and understanding what they want, and also having everything listed of what's important ahead of time so that you're going out there and you're really prepared before you start making offers on homes.
And just like Scott had said earlier, my business is based on referrals. If I just look at that paycheck and don't find the perfect house for that buyer and can encourage them to overbuy or buy a defective house,
sure,
then they're not coming back and they're not going to refer their friends to it. So it's more important to me that they find that house. I'm not moving in with them.
Yep.
So what I want doesn't matter. It matters what that buyer wants. Sometimes in that process, it's figuring out when they can move in. If they have a lease that's up, if they can move in quicker, what other factors are going on to get through that process.
So, Kathy, let's talk about earnest money, because I know it's different depending on the market that you're in as well, and how in the negotiating process. But what are you educating your clients about earnest money? And explain a little bit about what that is to my listeners.
Earnest money is showing good faith of what you are looking for. Minimum in any market is a 1% type of offer.
So it's kind of your standard 1% of whatever your offer is.
It's not going to. That's perfect if you're buying a house and no competition. But 2% up to 5%. Most of the time, people do not check that they will give non-refundable earnest money. Some of this market is that hot, and people are losing some money. Most of the time, in my experience, there's a way to get the earnest money back through the inspection process. They also need to be able to get financing.
Sure.
And that's part of the process. They're out there looking, and they find that perfect house. They put that offer in. They put their earnest money down, refundable or not refundable, but they can't get financing because they haven't talked to a teen in the world or somebody else. So the earnest money, generally, they can get it back for whatever reason is wrong with that house.
Yeah. So earnest money, it's going to go towards the down payment or towards the closing cost of the loan, unless something happens. You just got to make sure, again, this is one more key reason out of the numerous and many reasons why you have to work with an established realtor that's looking out for your best interest as well, and making sure that they're communicating on everything. Because if you waive your earnest money and financing falls through, then your earnest money is at risk. So understanding what that is and making sure you understand the contract is going to be key. So what about closing, Kathy, on the actual closing timeline? Closing
can vary, and part of the winning in the market is the time frame. 30 to 45 days can be accomplished on a regular sale. Occasionally, people with cash, and there are cash buyers out there, a lot more than there used to be, they can close pretty quickly. Again, it's back to whether they have a lease and they can move, and it depends on what the seller can do also.
Sure.
Some sellers can be out quickly, or if you're in a vacant house, it can close much quicker. But 30 to 45 days still is pretty standard to accommodate everyone's wishes in the process.
And for me on the lending side, I'm just going to put in information. There is no reason why a lender cannot close in a 30-day calendar day. There's a lot of lenders that don't and are not meeting closing dates. Make sure you get a guarantee to back your closing. I guarantee my closings on a 30-day calendar day, and there's a list of things that I need from the buyer to ensure that's going to happen, and it really makes it as close to bulletproof as you can when you're communicating that these are the items that need to be done, and there's no reason why it can't be done in a 30-day calendar. Now, if somebody has all their ducks in line and they provide the documents within 24 hours of requested and all the updated things that need to come in, there's no reason why you can't close in 20 days. But you've got to just have that relationship with your lender and make sure that they can, back the closing up, because if the seller isn't communicating and finding out what the seller's needs are, but a lot of times the seller wants to close as quickly as possible. So if you can go in with a 20-day calendar close versus a 45-day calendar close, I would imagine it's going to have some type of impact as far as the strength of your offer. Is that correct, Kathy?
If the seller wants to go quickly and it's vacant, absolutely. Sometimes sellers don't have a place to go themselves, and they're waiting for their house to sell, and they need that money from that process to the next one. And that's where sometimes the 45 days comes in. It's not that the buyer can't close quicker, it's that the seller doesn't want to close quicker.
And that's a good point. It's finding out from the seller what the needs are. So in this environment, when things are moving so quickly, as an agent that's representing the buyer, how are you getting all the information from what the sellers need to coach that to your buyer?
Well, this is a teamwork process.
Okay.
They pick up the phone, you call the listing agent, and try and find out what that seller's looking for.
Okay.
And that can help to write your offer in the first place. And that's one of the good ways you can win a multiple offer is you're trying to meet the seller's needs as well as your buyer's needs. Then they both win. But of course, when I'm representing this buyer, I want them to get the best house at the best price.
Of course.
When I'm representing the seller, I want them to also get the most money for their
Of
home.
course. Completely different view depending on which side you're representing. So let's move over to the seller side, because you represent both buyers and sellers as well. So on the seller side, what is something that you're advising for your sellers to get the maximum amount of dollars or top dollar for their home?
First thing, when I talk to a seller and you'll see their house, is see what condition it is. We live in our house and we don't see that, there's moss on the roof, there's wrinkles in the carpet. There's a furnace that hasn't been serviced in 10 years. There's different issues that way. A buyer's going to see that as soon as they walk in, or they've got clutter everywhere. They need to get that product, the house, ready for sale.
Yep.
Whether it's a pre-inspection, a formal one, or not a formal pre-inspection, it still needs to be looked at through a buyer's eyes so that you can generate the top dollar.
Just like if you're selling a used home, I'd ask yourself, are you going to get it detailed or not? Right. I mean, it's the same thing. And it's so surprising that, and especially in this environment where it is a seller's market, they feel that they have all the advantages. And they do have a lot of advantages. But still, bottom line is you have an opportunity to make top dollar on your property, and there are certain things you will always have to do to accomplish that. So what about multiple offers on the seller side? Because I would imagine it would be kind of fun to have 10 offers come in on your home, but at the same time there could be a lot of stress, because how do you, as a realtor representing the seller, advise on which one of these 10 offers to take?
First, you have to look at how they're qualified. And it is a personal. The seller can sell to whoever they want. They do not have to take the top dollar. The top dollar might be an investor. They might not want their family home to go to an investor.
Or the top dollar could be that cash buyer. And for whatever reason, they don't want to take a cash offer. Not that anybody would do that, but.
Well, no, they do, because if it's their property. I can't tell them which one to take. They're all just on a piece of paper and you're looking at it. However, the lender they've chosen and the type of loan they've chosen, it matters in whether it can go through. Some houses are not going to pass some FHA financing rules and may have to go through a 203K, which can take a lot longer than others. The earnest money amount, if they put that 5% down, and their inspections, I will always encourage a seller to pick someone who's gone through inspection so that house, when they've sold it, doesn't come back to haunt them because something was wrong and they didn't know about it.
Exactly.
As Kevin said, there may be water in that crawl space and they didn't open the hatch. Landscaping, different issues. I'm sorry, I'm getting back off target.
Yeah, no.
But multi-offers, just picking and having an agent that you can trust to go through and go through the fine details of each offer.
So like anything else that we do in life, preparation is what we need to do. If you're acting as if you're a seller out there getting ready to sell your home, or you're a buyer listening to my show getting ready to purchase a home, if you don't have a checklist, then you need to pick up the phone and give my show a call. 1-888-987-0570. Again, it's 1-888-987-0570. You should have a checklist of everything that you need to be doing to prepare ahead of time to make sure, whichever side you're on, to get the maximum deal for your purchase or the sale of your property. This is your host and mortgage expert Tina Mitchell signing off for the day. I want to thank all of you again for being here with for my show this Sunday, and come back and listen to me next Sunday, same place, same time, right here on 570 KVI.
The preceding program was paid for by Absolute Mortgage, a division of Pinnacle Capital Mortgage Corporation. Absolute Mortgage Company, NMLS number 81395 and Washington CL number 81395, is an equal opportunity housing lender. Tina Mitchell, MLO number 145420, is a licensed loan originator with Absolute Mortgage. Visit AbsoluteLoans.com or call 888-90-HOMES for cost information.